Yo, Lit the Veil back at you. And it is June 21st, 2026. It's Father's Day. I am not a father, but happy Father's Day to everybody. Um, this Sunday afternoon, on an early afternoon, the subject matter is a question of whether President Lincoln, and specifically his maternal lineage, did they have a heavy proportion of Indigenous ancestry? And so what I'm going to do here in this presentation or this excerpt, I'm going to, take a deep dive, somewhat of a deep dive. I think others have dove a little bit deeper than what I'm going to do, at least at this first part. And it may be a second part because it may demand some further, investigation. But I will say that I haven't seen too many historians grounded in, genomics. And so what I'm gonna do first is show the historical descriptions of President Lincoln described in his newspaper that I'm about to show. I'm gonna zoom it in, and then I'm gonna demonstrate how Abe Lincoln himself described himself. Then, like I said, I'm gonna get into the genomics. But anyway, I want to zoom this in. Let me go here. Yeah, right here. So I'm gonna zoom this in much more to make sure that this can be seen on your screen. I'm gonna zoom it just a little bit more. See how that looks. Yeah, I think that's clear enough. So let me go back up. Actually, let me zoom it out so you can see what the name of the newspaper is. And so you can see when the newspaper was published. The newspaper is called the Manchester Journal. This particular article was written by H.E. Minor and C.A. Pierce, which looks to be Manchester, June 4th, 1860. It's got to be before before emancipation. Let me look this up. Let's see here. Because this is supposed to be right after Abe Lincoln's inauguration. So I'm gonna look it up right here. You guys are not gonna see this on the screen, but I'm just gonna look it up just to make sure I got this right. When was Abe Lincoln's inauguration? That ain't how you spell inauguration. Let's make sure I get that. Yeah, I spelled that wrong. But anyway, his inauguration year was indeed 1861. His second inauguration was 1865. So this has to be even though it's kind of blurry and it looks like 1867. This has to be June 4th, 1861, because I know that this came out right after his inauguration. And so you'll see here the discussion of why Lincoln was so supported by the North, at least in their understanding, or at least they're explaining the theory as to why. And during that theory, um, they make a claim about uh, Lincoln's ancestry. That's what I'm going to read here. I'm going to zoom it back in. Where it's highlighted. We'll go on the screen, make sure it's looking pretty good on the screen. I think that's good enough. And it reads, and in the next place, by the misrepresentations in the windows and false suggestions universally circulated throughout that region as to the character, views, feelings, and purposes of the people of the North, it is represented and generally believed that it was the design of the Northern people, who are called abolitionists, in the selection of both president and vice president from that section, that as soon as the power was fully in their hands to emancipate and set free all the slaves, and for that purpose had chosen a Negro, or one who had Negro blood, as the president. All right, and if we move to the left, you can see on this column to the left that it's labeled the president. And you can see here they're referring to Mr. Lincoln. Okay, so they go on to say or call him a Negro president. Now just think, how much of a Negro do you need to look like for someone to call you a Negro president? Negro president. So I would think that if he was somewhat mixed, or he seemed to be mixed, they might have called him mulatto. But that I can't assume that, because back then, if you looked enough like a Negro, they would get, they were just paranoid about, they were xenophobic about having any type of Negro looking features. So I can't, I have to backtrack that and say I can't make the assumption, how much of a Negro that he was, but apparently he was enough of a Negro looking man to be described as a Negro president, which is the most important, because in modern times, the depictions that are shown of what is believed to be Abraham Lincoln looks nothing like a Negro. You know what I'm saying? And it's unfortunate that people still try to ambiguate, what they're clearly describing as someone who has heavy Negro features. You know what I'm saying? And they'll try to say, well, he just had a suntan. Yeah, okay. So anyway, I'm gonna move on. It says these stories have not only united the people there in opposition to the people of the North, but have excited a fever in the blood and spirit for warfare, especially in the young men of the South. They have universally, even the boys of 14 and 15 years of age, a little bit, read it a little bit better. 14 years of age, can't read that. Not listening to many of the Secession in the banks of the Mississippi, in line with troops that description, and when the boat on which I came up the river from Vicksburg reached Memphis, it was stopped and we found it blockaded, vast number of troops being stationed there to prevent. Let me just move forward. I don't want to get too far off because I think there's another part here. I thought I already had it highlighted. Okay, yeah, here it is. So the second paragraph, let me zoom it out just a little bit. It says, I heard a man of more than common information, wealth, and standing in society observe and speaking of the differences existing between the North and South, that he should not care anything about it, meaning that he should not oppose the North if they had not a chance a Negro president or one that had Negro blood, and that he could not bear to live under a Negro president. I think that's pretty clear there. you know, yeah. I mean, words, and this is from, I got this from the Library of Congress. It's an official newspaper article, and this was printed, um, after Lincoln's inauguration in 1961. Man, this is the archival. This is official archive. You know what I mean? So they're describing him as being Negro, and it's just interesting that they'll take this description and they'll say that he was rumored to be a Negro. No, he was called a Negro. Now, the extent of his Negro ancestry, this, that, and the other, people want to, question that, that's fine. But the way he was perceived was clearly as a Negro. So anyway, I want to move to the next article. And the next article is going to, demonstrate how Lincoln himself described himself, which I think is the most important. We could talk about everything else from how anybody else described him to genomic data and everything like that. But I think the most important description is what you're about to see here, which is he himself describing himself as. Let me get a drum roll, man. Let me get the drum roll. Let's see if I can get it. Okay, yeah, that's a drum roll right there. I'm gonna get it prepped first. I'm gonna move this off the screen. Get something else on the screen. There we go. Okay, so I'm not going to read this whole article. I just want to read this first paragraph of how he described himself. He says, if any personal description of me is thought desirable, it may be said I am in height 6 feet 4 inches, nearly, lean in flesh, weighing on average 180 pounds, dark complexion, with coarse black hair and gray eyes. No other marks or brands recollected. But yet, as you can see, this is the depiction still pictured across the internet. And I think there are some verifiable sources saying that Lincoln had doubles. Yeah, people, you know, doubling as him. And it's suspected that he had people doubling for him because he himself was a Negro, and he was concerned about how that can impact his campaign, by people knowing that he was a Negro. But obviously, in that um, in that article, well, that was after he was inaugurated, so that didn't really have much to do with his campaign. But it's suspected that he had people that look like this doubling for him to give the impression that he was, a contemporary European looking man. Um, so last but not least, I want to get this up on the screen. We're gonna dive into these to this genomic study here. And remove this off of here. Get that genomic study here. All right. Share screen. Yeah. So this is titled Genetic Lincoln. And the subtitle is Nancy Hanks Lincoln, an mtDNA study unlocking the secrets of Abraham Lincoln's maternal ancestry. All right, this was printed. This was published in 2015. It reads: Abraham Lincoln is a monumental figure in our nation's history. Yet his mother's maternal ancestry has been debated for over 100 years. Most historians agree that Nancy Hanks was the illegitimate daughter of Lucy Hanks, who had a second illegitimate daughter, Sarah Sally Hanks, before marrying Henry Sparrow and giving birth to 8 more children. So the question then becomes, who were the parents of Lucy Hanks Sparrow? While most have believed Lucy Hanks Sparrow was the daughter of Joseph Hanks and Ann Nancy Lee of Richmond, Virginia, and Nelson, Kentucky, others have claimed Lucy Hanks was born Lucy Shipley, and prior to her marriage to Henry Sparrow, had been married to a James Hanks, a supposed son of Joseph and Ann Lee Hanks, making her their daughter-in-law instead of their daughter. They have further claimed that she was one of the 5 Shipley sisters, 2 of whom were Naomi Shipley and Rachel Shipley. This study addresses this long-standing controversy and seeks to provide an authoritative reference sample of Abraham Lincoln's mitochondria DNA. So, just to explain this in a nutshell, some people may already understand this, but there is somewhat of a controversy in terms of Lucy Hanks's mother and father and who they were. And so this article is demonstrating the 2 most plausible genealogical explanations for Lucy Hanks' parents. And the first one they describe here is that she was her father was Joseph Hanks, and her mother was Ann Nancy Lee, who was married to Joseph Hanks. She eventually marries, or at least have children by a James Hanks. And as the story goes, James Hanks is supposed to be a distant relative of Joseph Hanks. They were supposed to be within the same, family and social dynamic network. And so they were supposed to be cousins, James Hanks and Joseph Hanks. So yes, she was in this scenario. She was supposed to be the daughter of Joseph Hanks, and then she was supposed to later have children by James Hanks, and then she remarries um, a Sparrow. Okay, and then the second scenario is that her father is actually a Shipley, but it seems that, let me see here. It says they have further claimed that she was one of the Shipley sisters, two of whom were Naomi Shipley Mitchell and Rachel Shipley Berry. This study addresses, okay. So what I'm trying to establish here is whether they're saying that, let's see, Lee Hanks making her daughter-in-law instead of daughter. They have further claimed that she was one of the Shipley sisters. I don't think it says any more than that. But and Rachel Shipley Berry. Okay, so that does answer the question, I think, because if it says that 5 Shipley sisters, to whom were Naomi Shipley Mitchell, Rachel Shipley Berry. Yeah, I have to look into that a little bit further. But I think in this scenario, her mother's maiden name would have been Berry, and the father would have been Shipley. So she would have had a completely different maternal line here. Matter of fact, now that I'm thinking about it, that more than makes sense, because you're going to see here that they separate the two mitochondrial lineages. And I'll read. Nancy Hanks Lincoln has no living descendants, so mtDNA samples were obtained from matrilineal descendants of 2 known daughters of Joseph Hanks and Ann Nancy Lee. So what they're saying here is that this person known as Nancy Hanks Hall, Mary Hanks' friend, and who else? And maternal descendants of 2 daughters. Okay, yeah, so that whole maternal line of Nancy Lee, from her daughters, which she had with Joseph Hanks, which is Nancy Hanks Hall and Mary Hanks' friend, and then they traced their daughters to see if it was consistent. And so their daughters are Sophia Hanks Lynch Landgrand and Margaret Hanks LeGrand. So I think I pronounced that the first time wrong. That's Sophia Hanks Lynch LeGrand and Margaret Hanks LeGrand. And matrilineal descendants of 2 daughters of Lucy Hanks from her marriage to Henry Sparrow. Margaret Sparrow Ingram and Lucinda Sparrow Richardson. This group shall be identified as Group A. So essentially what they're saying is that that group is going to be Group A regardless of the remarrying, because the constant is Lucy. Lucy first married Joseph Hanks, and then she remarries a Sparrow. But who she's marrying is not relevant to mtDNA, because she's the one carrying and passing on the mtDNA. So the mtDNA lineage is following Lucy. So anybody associated with Lucy, whether it was the first husband or the second husband, her and her children with these men are going to be in Group A, because she's the constant. Now, she would hypothetically be the constant with the Shipleys as well, and I'm going to go on to read how they established that as well. Let me finish this first paragraph. And so this group shall be identified as Group A. Full mitochondrial sequences reveal Group A belongs to a rare haplogroup X1C. In addition to the mutations used to define haplogroup X1C, they share a core set of 3 more specific mutations. These results indicate Group A participants descend from the same maternal line. The rarity of the X1C haplogroup makes these matching samples more definitive. All right, mtDNA samples were also collected from matrilineal descendants of two Shipley sisters, Naomi Shipley, who married Robert Mitchell, and Rachel Shipley, who married Richard Berry Sr. This group shall be identified as Group B, matching HVR1 and HVR2's results from these two samples are haplogroup H, indicating Group B descendants do not descend from the same maternal line as Group A. Now, Lucy was, associated with the Berries. You can see that the Berries married one of the Shipley sisters. So that's not, the Berry is not it's not a maternal line. It really is irrelevant anyway, because this maternal line is being tracked through Lucy. But I just wanted to clear that up. But anyway, in summary, these results can be used with confidence and as a reference for DNA tests of Abraham Lincoln artifacts, and for distinguishing between the two accounts of the parentage of Nancy Hanks by including participants from multiple lines of descent from Anne Lee Hanks. The results conclude that Lucy Hanks Sparrow was not a sister of Rachel Shipley and Naomi Shipley, and the results provide evidence supporting the conclusion that Lucy Hanks was a daughter of Anne Lee Hanks, and all matrilineal lineages were researched by the study authors. So essentially, they're saying that they know this, pretty non-subjectively, because there was little question as to who the mother was of Nancy. The only question was who was the parents of Lucy. There was no question who the parents of Nancy Hanks was. Well, I think it might have been a question of who her father was, but there was no question who the mother was, which was Lucy. And so Lucy's descendants, although it wasn't the direct line from Lucy, meaning that Lucy's daughter's line had become extinct. So what they did was basically they tested Nancy's aunts, which would be her mother's sisters, and her descendants down line. And what they found was consistently X1C. And what this does is it grounds the phenotypical descriptions of Abraham Lincoln into mitochondrial DNA that is not of contemporary European, ancestry. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna just, I already know the answer to most of this, you know what I mean? But I'm gonna research now, and I'm gonna use Gemini to do it, to see what was the most probable way that an X1C could have entered America. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna bring this up on a separate screen. Let's get this screen. Yeah, okay. So I had already started this before. So let me get that on the screen. We're gonna have a little bit of fun. Here we go. Okay, so the question that I asked, let me make sure it's on the screen. Glad I checked. There we go. Now it's on the screen for sure. So the question that I asked Gemini is, historically, Where is mtDNA haplogroup X1C mainly found, and where did it coalesce? It says mitochondrial mtDNA haplogroup X1C is historically found in the Levant in North Africa, and it first coalesced in the Near East. It says, where is it mainly found? Haplogroup X1C is an exceptionally rare lineage. Historically and modernly, it is primarily concentrated in the following populations: the Levant, frequently identified with the Druze population; North Africa, notably found in Tunisia and linked to ancient Carthage; the Iberian Peninsula, distributed via ancient maritime trade and migration; Sephardic Jewish lineages, strongly correlated with Jewish diaspora migration routes. Europe appears in isolated rare cases across Italy, Ireland, and Norway. It says where and when it coalesced. Place of origin for X1C first coalesced in the Near East Levant region. Associated ancestry. Geneticists trace its initial roots back to the Paleolithic or Neolithic Near Eastern populations such as the Natufians. Now, in previous discussions, I'm not going to bring this up now, but in previous, not discussions, but scientific reports, investigations, so forth and so on, it was reported that the Natufians were about 33%, if I can remember correctly. It was reported that the Natufians were about 33% of what you would call sub-Saharan, and then the rest of that percentage was what you would call Black Eurasian. And this is the reason why I'm doing this now. This will probably be the last of anything related to Black Eurasians before I get to the actual full presentation or the broader presentation of Black Eurasians in ancient Europe, because that's non-subjectively what they were. But we can see what this population looked like in the Levant at this time. And they're saying that this mtDNA is associated with Natufians. The Natufians were definitely a Black population with heavy sub-Saharan, what they call, I don't even believe in that misnomer sub-Saharan, man. That's a colonial term to make people think that, sub-Saharan people, or people who have what they have deemed sub-Saharan phenotypes, could never have been settled in any area above the sub-Saharan, even though the others, they may be close to 70%, that would be 67%, is what you would call North African Levantine. And that North African Levantine is from the Black Eurasian population. Like I said, when I get to that broader presentation, there's something very non-subjective that speaks to that genetically. And so, but anyway, to continue, time of coalescence, according to the family tree DNA discoverer, the most recent common ancestor of the X1C lineage lived around 7250 BCE. Historical spread. It was later dispersed across the Mediterranean, largely by Phoenician maritime traders and Jewish migration networks. If you are researching your own genetic results, feel free to share if you are looking at an exact subclade or trying to trace a specific maternal ancestral line, so I can provide more tailored historical context. I'm going to say I am researching this as it pertains to the ancestry of Abraham Lincoln's mother. Let's see what it's going to say. It's again. What? All right. What do you know about Nancy Lincoln's mother? So we're gonna do it right there. Okay. So what I'll do is it just must be maybe this window. I'm gonna hop over to another window before I put up on the screen and see if this problem persists somewhere else. Abraham Lincoln's mother. Okay, it's coming up on this screen, so I'm gonna drop this screen. Go to another one. Okay. Now you guys can see it. All right. So I asked, what do you know about Abraham Lincoln's mother? It says Nancy Hanks Lincoln was the biological mother of the 16th U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. Despite dying when Abraham was just 9 years old, she left an indelible mark on his character, intellect, and moral compass. He famously referred to her in later years as his angel mother, stating, "All that I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother." You can see how they got her looking over here. But anyway, man, we know what time it is. Early life and mysterious lineage. So here we go. Birth. She was born on February 5th, 1784 in Hampshire County, Virginia, now Mineral County, West Virginia. Nancy was the daughter of Lucy Hanks. Her father's identity remains unknown, and historical consensus holds that she was born illegitimate. All right, just like we said, her father was unknown, but her mother is we know who her mother was. Childhood. Due to social stigma of her birth, she experienced an unstable childhood, moving around Kentucky to live with various relatives, including her grandparents and her aunt Elizabeth Sparrow, which had to have been her in-laws. But anyway, historical accounts from contemporaries describe her as a slender woman standing around 5'7" or taller, with dark hair, gray or hazel eyes, and a sharp, angular face that possessed a naturally melancholy expression. Physical traits her son Abraham heavily inherited. Okay, so she married Thomas Lincoln in 1806. The couple had three children: Sarah, Abraham, and Thomas Jr. So Sarah was the one of the ones that was tested as well. So they tested Nancy's aunts, and they tested seemingly from here based on the names. They tested Nancy's no. Nancy's lineage was extinct, so they tested it indirectly. Okay, frontier life. In 1816, the family migrated from Kentucky to a rugged, heavily forested homestead in Spencer County, Indiana, partially to escape chaotic Kentucky land title disputes and because of Thomas's opposition to slavery. But this is the question I'm going to ask because I want to get straight to it. What do you know about the mtDNA associated with Nancy Lincoln, Abe's mother? Okay, so Gemini is finding the same thing. Mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA tested from the Nancy Hanks Lincoln mtDNA study has revealed that Abraham Lincoln's mother belonged to the extremely rare haplogroup X1C. Because Abraham Lincoln has no living direct descendants, his children and siblings died without leaving ongoing lines. Okay, so maybe that was Nancy's daughter who was tested, because it's just saying that Abraham Lincoln's line is the one that became extinct. So let me read on this. Let's see what it says here. Researchers tracked down the tested, verified matrilineal mother-to-daughter descendants of Nancy's maternal relatives. The results released by Family Tree DNA resolved the 150-year-old historical debate regarding Lincoln's lineage. So once again, here with Gemini is also converging on the same information, because obviously this is widespread across the internet that Nancy Hanks Lincoln carried the rare haplogroup X1C. Proof of Nancy's mother, the illegitimacy question. For over a century, historians argued over whether Nancy Hanks was born illegitimate. The contradicting theories. One theory stated Nancy was the illegitimate daughter of a woman named Lucy Hanks. A competing Queen of Theory claimed she was the legitimate daughter of James Hanks and Lucy Shipley. The genetic proof. The 2015 study compared the mtDNA of descendants from both potential lines. The descendants of Lucy Hanks matched the rare X1C haplogroup, while the Shipley family descendants carried the incredibly common European H haplogroup. So this has pretty much been established as far as what mtDNA Nancy Hanks carried because of her mother's maternal line, which would have been Lucy Hanks Sparrow. Okay, that's pretty foundational and solid there, right? So it's going to go on. I see it's already jumping on what I'm already thinking in this point number 2, or number 2, the extreme rarity of haplogroup X1C. Ancient origins. Ancient origins. While the overarching haplogroup X is a small, distinct branch found in low frequencies across Europe, the Near East, and even among some Native American populations, the X1C subgroup is exceptionally rare. Now, you see here that it mentions that it is present in Native American populations. Now, we already have the X2 associated with Native American or indigenous populations. Kennewick Man is, if you watch that series, you know that Kennewick Man was found to have the X2. So I'm just, I'm just putting what the evidence is showing together. You know what I mean? You make your own conclusion, but I'm just saying, why is these different explanations, especially the most rare ones, why are they consistently being found in North America, and particularly the East Coast, and even more particularly the Northeast, where the Solutrean migrational population was theoretically supposed to have migrated to. I'm just saying. Specific mutation marker. In addition to the baseline mutations that define the X1C, the Hanks maternal line shares a core set of 3 highly specific additional mutations. This unique signature serves as an unmistakable genetic fingerprint for anyone belonging to this specific family tree. Interesting. Because this exact mtDNA profile is so rare and distinctly documented, it provides historians with a tool to authenticate Lincoln's assassination relics. Blood stains on the clothing, pillows, or hair clippings attributed to Abraham Lincoln from the night he was assassinated can be cross-referenced with the X1C profile to verify their authenticity. Would you like to explore the Hanks family tree further, or look into how Y-DNA testing was used to map Abraham Lincoln's paternal side? Well, first, before we get into Nancy's ancestry, could you elaborate? Spelling is all wrong. On the unique mutations found in her X1C. When geneticists conducted full mitochondrial sequencing for the Nancy Hanks Lincoln mtDNA study, published through Family Tree DNA, they found 2 distinct layers to her genetic profile: the baseline mutations that classify her into haplogroup X1C, and a set of 3 private core mutations that belong exclusively to her direct maternal branch. The baseline X1C mutations in mitochondrial DNA haplogroups are defined by a specific sequence of inherited mutations passed down through thousands of years. The geographic disconnect, haplogroup X as a whole, is rare in Europe, but its X1 branch is almost never found in the northern or western Europe. X1 is heavily concentrated in North Africa and Near East, particularly among the Druze communities of the Levant. All right. The pioneer surprise, seeing a colonial Virginia pioneer family, historically assumed to be English, Scottish, or Irish origin, carrying the baseline mutations for X1C, stunned researchers. It indicates that far back on Nancy's direct maternal line, an ancestor migrated from the Mediterranean or Middle East into Europe before the line eventually moved to the American colonies. Are you sure? And as I move forward, I'm gonna share some genome studies that indicate that there are older and younger versions of haplogroups, and they're going to indicate how they came about this. So what I'm thinking is because of the way these genomes appear in the way that they're being sequenced, which is mainly these fast S&P methods. A lot of haplogroups, according to the geneticists that challenged this this method of sequencing, they're saying that many haplogroups can be classified as the same haplogroup that might not actually be the same identical haplogroup, and that these haplogroups, uh, one population carrying what's titled the same exact haplogroup may actually be a younger or older version of that haplogroup. And I'm gonna explain that in more detail. I know that might sound strange to some at this point, but when I get done reading that specific genome study, I think it'll be pretty clear what they were trying to communicate. But what I'm saying is that it seems like there's definitely an X population in the other side of the world, in the Levant, within the Levant in North Africa. But there's also X populations, in particular the X2, that is definitely indigenous to the Americas. And I'm thinking that these specific or private S&Ps that are associated with Anne Lincoln and her, descendants and her ancestors are actually indigenous to the Americas, because here they're explaining that these private S&Ps are different than the normal X1C. Okay, and they might be calling it different, but based on the genome studies that I've seen, I think it's a chance that they're different and they're not the same. They're not the same phylogenetically. They're not identical. They're not identical. They're very similar. These are different lineages. Period. These are distinctly different lineages. And when I read those articles as I go on, it's going to make sense. But that's going to be something dedicated specifically to that. Anyway, the 3 private branch mutations beyond the standard genetic markers that anyone in haplogroup X1C would have, the study identified 3 distinct unclassified mutations shared by all of the verified matrilineal Hanks descendants tested. What they represent: these 3 mutations occurred as random replication errors in the egg cells of Nancy's direct maternal ancestors generations prior. The Hanks fingerprint. Because these 3 additional mutations are not part of the standard X1C definition, they serve as a hyper-private family signature. If a person or a historical relic matches the global X1C profile, they may be related to Nancy Lincoln. However, if they carry the baseline X1C profile plus these 3 exact mutations, it proves with absolute genealogical certainty that they belong to the exact same colonial maternal line. That's very interesting, but it's not saying what these private STPs are. Let me just get straight to the point. What are these private S&Ps called or identified as? It's finally told us. Okay. X1C6A1 is mitochondrial DNA tested mutations are identified by their exact coordinate position on the mitochondrial genome alongside the nucleotide shift that occurred relative to human reference standard. Defining genetic profile for Nancy's maternal lineage, identified as Group A, is the Nancy Hanks Lincoln mtDNA study, is broken down across the two main hypervariable regions of mtDNA. Hypervariable region 1, section of her DNA, specific lineage is defined by a cluster of 7 mutations. Cytosine to thymine transition at position 6104. Adenine to guanine transition at position 16129. Adenine insertion mutation at position 16183. Athymine to cytosine transition at position 16187. And guanine to adenine transition at position 16230. Okay, so it explained it in specific detail there. It's got 2 more here. Athymine to cytosine transition at position 16278. And cytosine to thymine transition at position 16311. All right, hypervariable region 2 SNPs. In the HVR2 region, her line is anchored by 4 highly stable mutations. And to backtrack a little bit, this is often often overlooked or suppressed in terms of how specific these SNPs are and how, what's the word for it? How unique these SNPs can be when they're shared by 2 different populations, and basically how these unique SNPs or these private SNPs, basically what they mean in terms of ancestry. Because what mainstream academia tries to do is that they try to assign these SNPs to certain populations, certain modern populations at that, and they try to make it appear to be that these modern populations originated these SNPs, if that makes sense. And they try to erode the fact that they're carrying these SNPs, these private SNPs, in a scrambled way because of mixed ancestry. But what some genomicists are pointing out, including the author Huang, and I forgot the other author that he worked with in the Kennewick study, they are pointing out these private SNPs being shared with ancestral groups to let the public know that, yes, you might be seeing these SNPs present in these modern populations. They might look like this, or they might look like that in the modern sense, but their ancestry is coming from other populations. And in that Kennewick man study, they're showing that it was heavily African related because of the private SNPs that they share, which is very significant. And here it is, they're saying the same thing about Nancy Hanks and the private SNP configuration that she has, because it's distinct to her lineage. And so basically, if a population is sharing these distinct private SNPs, and you know that they derive from the broader haplogroup family, then that gives you an indication of what type of ancestral input the descendant had into it. So I just wanted to point that out. But here we are, we're talking about the hypervariable region 2, HVR2 SNPs. In the HVR2 region, her line is anchored by 4 highly highly stable, I'm sorry, not unstable, highly stable mutations. C1527, 52T, cytosine to thymine transition at position 152, the A153G, adenine to guanine transition at position 153, the C195T, the cytosine to thymine transition at position 195, the A247G is an adenine to guanine transition position 247. It goes on to say here, the private Hank signature, while geneticists use the broad label X1C681 to map the sequence on the global phylogenetic tree, the Pacific tree private mutations referenced in the study are the rare variants found beyond the standard baseline definitions of ancient European Near Eastern X1C branches. Because the study utilized full mitochondrial sequencing, these specific coding regions, SNPs, allow researchers to draw a straight line from modern-day Hank's maternal descendants back to Lucy Hanks and directly to Nancy Hanks Lincoln. Now that we have covered the Pacific genetic markers, would you like to explore how these SNPs eliminated the Shipley family from her tree, or look into the historical theories regarding where the North African Middle Eastern X1C line originally entered the British colonial ancestry? What was I going to ask here? Yes, we can examine how the ancestry entered, but first, can I safely say that downstream S&Ps, so we safely say that downstream S&Ps are a development within the United States, not Europe. Let's see what it says. Okay, it says, no, we can't safely say that. In fact, global phylogenetic data demonstrates that the unique downstream branch belonging to Nancy Hanks Lincoln, haplogroup X1C681, developed long before her ancestors ever crossed the Atlantic. How you know that? Molecular clock of mitochondrial DNA relies on a very slow, predictable rate of mutation, averaging roughly one mutation every several thousand years in the coding. I see what they're trying to say. Okay, so yeah, but you know, they can say that, man, but we've already been through this this slow S&P versus fast S&Ps where mutation saturation comes into play to a point where saturation affects how much you can interpret from these mutations. They might have taken place more recent, they might have taken place more further in the future. It's very difficult to know once mutation saturation happens. And if you're observing fast S&Ps, which I know, I'm pretty confident that that was the method being used. Matter of fact, was the fast or slow S&P method used to observe this? simultaneously. Okay. To observe the mutations. Complete. The study mapped the data across two distinct speeds of genetic mutations: fast regions, slow region, the coding region. You see here, we see that the fast region is where the private S&Ps were found. And I'm gonna confirm that. I mean, it's pretty much already been confirmed. I don't think I really need to. I mean, it's stating it right here. Nancy's DNA. This is where researchers observed the rapid shift S&P like C16311T. So, but obviously, those regions are susceptible to mutation saturation. See what happens when we put this all together. See what I'm saying? You are entirely correct. Mutation saturation is a massive vulnerability in the fast mutating hypervariable regions because these specific areas have a high mutation rate. They frequently experience reoccurrent mutations, back mutations, or parallel mutations across completely unrelated human lineages. I mean, I ain't trying to be corny and pat myself on the back, but who's doing this, man? Besides these, these qualified, genomic geneticists, molecular geneticists, these heroes like Huang and his partner, whatever, you know what I mean? Thank those geneticists, molecular geneticists for being brave enough to tell the truth, you know what I mean? And as you can clearly see, both they and Gemini are converging on the same principle that yes, these regions are highly susceptible to mutation saturation. So it could have been, a couple thousand years ago. It could have been, you know what I'm saying, 100. You don't know. You know what I mean? I can't make a full determination. It could have been. It could have came through, Europe on that side of the map and then entered the Americas. You know what I mean? Because that seems like the mode of entry for. Well, no, I can't say that. Kennewick Man was found to have that that mtDNA, but his mother could have been indigenous to the Americas. I mean, obviously their article stated that the Salutrian population encountered indigenous African like people when they entered the United States, so they could have likely encountered the X1C when they entered. It doesn't necessarily mean that they got it from Europe and then it was brought into the Americas necessarily. You know what I mean? Because based on Huang's experiment, they determined that or at least they believe that that population encountered these African like indigenous people here in America when they got to America. And so yeah, I think you guys get the gist of that. So I just want to ask, first, so that would make it very difficult to assess coalescence with 100% certainty or strong probability because there is no way to filter for mutation saturation. Correct? I'm just saying, man. For all of the jabronis who want to act like I don't understand what I'm reading and I'm misinterpreting, I'm just saying, man. I mean, how long it's gonna take for y'all to just come to the essence of the truth, man? Yes, you have hit it on the core. You have hit on the core challenge of molecular clock analysis. If researchers only had the hypervariable regions to look at, calculating the coalescence time, the time back to a most recent common ancestor with strong probability would be nearly impossible due to mutation saturation. However, geneticists can filter for mutation saturation to achieve high probability coalescence estimates, specifically by using partitioned evolutionary models and relying on the coding region of the genome. This process operates through specific mechanisms: stripping and masking the hypervariable regions and running coalescence simulations to calculate age. Algorithms like those used by family tree DNA discover, mathematically mask or downgrade hypervariable SNPs. Mutational hotspots are essentially treated as noise and are weighted near zero in the molecular clock equation. By removing the saturation-prone hypervariable data from the time calculation, the risk of understanding or overestimating genetic distance is removed. But it doesn't sound like it could be completely removed, because what they're doing is basically smoothing. And I'm going to ask you that question. Relying on the ultra-slow coding region. Instead, coalescence models are built on coding region, which contains roughly 15,400 base pairs of highly stable DNA. Coding region mutations are so rare that the probability of parallel mutations or back mutations occurring at the exact same base pair across different lines is incredibly low. But see, that would be the most stable part of the genome, which I'm not going to argue with, because theoretically, that's the most stable part of the genome. But the thing is, what's also important is the fast SNPs and how they're filtering it. It says because saturation is functionally non-existent in this zone, mutations accumulate linearly over millennia. This linear accumulation allows algorithms to apply a standard Poisson distribution model to measure time and define confidence intervals. While 100% certainty is impossible, margin of error. While saturation can be filtered out, you can still never achieve 100% certainty for an exact calendar year. Not because of saturation, but because mutations are random events. For example, look at a Nancy Hanks Lincoln specific branch on the family tree DNA discovered database. Haplogroup X1C6A has a point estimate origin of 2000 or 2550 BCE. However, because of a mutation might happen in 500 years or 5,000 years, the 95% confidence interval ranges all the way from 3960 to 1338 BCE. So even within that range, 1338, even within that range, the algorithm that that Gemini is associated with, they're not going to constitute 1338 with indigenous people carrying the X lineage in 1338. You know what I'm saying? But it's not just about the time, it's about the region as well. So, you know, this X1, the downstream S&Ps developed in Nancy's lineage. Um, Gemini is understanding it to be from Europe, but there should be some type of indications of whether if it was geographically regional or not. So I'm gonna ask: is those are or have those specific downstream S&Ps been found in Europe? No, they have not. The highly Pacific downstream S&Ps that define Nancy and Lincoln's exact branch, haplogroup X1C6A1, has never been found in native European populations. When researchers point out that the parent branches have modern matches of reported maternal origins in Germany or Norway, they are referring to the broader ancient tree. The final cascading mutations that lock down the X1C6A1 subclade present a completely different geographic story. Just as I was saying, it is exclusively an American pioneer clade. Look, man, they can try. They can try to ambiguate this stuff with the people, man. But people like me, I know I'm probably not the only person who has found this out or understands it like this or pointed this out. I'm not gonna try to make that claim, but I don't think as many that's gonna ask these type of questions who are not molecular geneticists. You know what I'm saying? There are some though, you know what I mean? There are a handful out there that I've come across, and there's probably more that I just haven't come across, you know what I mean? So I don't want to be trying to like hog all the credit, but you know what I mean? I think I do my thing pretty thorough. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, it says it is exclusively an American pioneer clade. To date, every single verified individual in global genetic databases who carries the precise downstream S&Ps defining X1C6A1 and its sub-branch X1C6A1A traces their maternal line back to the common geographic bottleneck, colonial Virginia and early Kentucky. There is a zero footprint of this specific final S&P sequence left behind in modern British, Irish, or continental European reference populations. Oh man, this is good. I wasn't expecting this, man. I did this on the fly. The timeline shifts to the Americas. X1C6A, the parent line, formed around 2550 BCE. This ancient branch is the one shared with a tiny handful of Europeans, confirming that the line migrated through Europe long ago. So, I think what's probable now. I think, just like Kennewick Man, that this X1C6A was a part of the broader migrational group with that Kennewick Man group and the El Moran. You know what I'm saying? Because it's saying that the base of the family is in Europe. That could be somewhat challenged as well, but for now, I'll take it at face value that this is the truth, that the base is in Europe. However, what's astonishing is that the downstream S&Ps are only found in America. I'm just saying. So this point, I don't even really even need to get into the ancestry of, you know, Nancy's parents. We need to know if we're tapping into ancestry, we really need to know the maternal side because that's what the mtDNA is associated with. But just to put it on the screen, um, let me read this part why this matters globally. Because these exact downstream mutations have not been found in Europe, the X1C681 profile remains a purely founder mutation of the American frontier. It is so tightly confined to the Hanks maternal lineage that it acts like a closed genetic loop. Anyone carrying it today can be definitively linked back to Nancy Lincoln's immediate colonial family tree without the risk of accidentally matching an unrelated European branch. Would you like to explore who the earliest known colonial maternal ancestor was that brought this line to Virginia, or should we look at how Lucy Hanks' placement in this tree finally ended the historical gossip about Nancy's birth? First, I just want to incorporate once again the base they're saying, and it looks pretty definitive that it was in Europe. You know, haven't really found anything to really, challenge otherwise. But it looks as though there was some type of migration prior to contemporary European entry into the Americas because those contemporary Europeans did not carry it. There's basically an ancestral gap between the base X1C 61681. I think that's the base. Let me go back up. Yeah, the base is X1C6A, whereas the downstream lines begins with X1C681. So the 6A is the base that is found in Europe, but here's the thing, it's found very rarely in Europe at the same time. You know what I mean? So we at least know that it did not originate in Europe. It still looks like it originated on that side of the world, though, out of the Levant in North Africa. But in terms of contemporary Europeans, this is something that's found very rare in Europeans. So what I'm saying is the likelihood of those Europeans carrying it into America during colonial times is highly unlikely. Putting that together now, let's investigate. Just for fun, let's investigate the paternal line, just so people can see what the paternal line, her father's line, was. What ancestry is Nancy's father associated with? Okay, no Pacific paternal ancestry. Abraham Lincoln's account, a well-bred Virginia planter. Primary source regarding Nancy's father comes from Abraham Lincoln himself. In a private conversation with law partner William Herndon, Lincoln discussed his maternal grandfather, the noble tradition. Lincoln believed his mother was the daughter of a well-bred Virginia planter or nobleman. Lincoln confided that he believed his own analytical mind, ambition, and legal intellect did not come from the impoverished Hanks family or his illiterate father, but rather were inherited from this unnamed aristocratic Virginian grandfather. So let's see. Okay. That kind of sounds a little. I'm gonna say, wouldn't that? Wouldn't Lincoln's own statement contradict the DNA results? Let's make sure I'm understanding that correctly. Yeah, that's right. Because it was controversial who the father was. The mtDNA is coming through the mother, so it really doesn't matter whether the Hanks are confirmed or not. And so Lincoln is saying that the Hanks was not, his true paternal, grandfather. You know what I'm saying? So that part is just like Jim and I is saying, that's not a contradictory, because even though it's not certain who his mother's paternal side was coming from, what is certain is his mother, and that's where the mtDNA is coming from. So okay, I understand the logic now, and I had to kind of get myself together there. But anyway, so that's unknown. That's interesting. I'm gonna say, what about Lincoln's mother's maternal side? Let's see what it says. Now that the 2015 DNA results have permanently severed the incorrect Shipley family theory, we can trace Nancy Hanks Lincoln's maternal side with high historical genetic confidence. Nancy's maternal ancestry goes directly through the mother, Lucy Hanks, to her maternal grandmother, and Nancy Lee Hanks, mapping a classic colonial family history. Her maternal grandfather and Nancy Lee. Nancy's maternal grandmother was Ann Lee. Marriage around 1758, Anne married Joseph Hanks in Richmond County, Virginia. Together they had 8 children, with Lucy Hanks being one of their eldest daughters. The migration, Anne and Joseph lived in northern Fareham Parish, Virginia, before moving their large family to the rugged frontier of Nelson County, Kentucky in the 1780s. The DNA connection, Anne Lee Hanks is the central matriarch of this entire genetic saga. She is the ancestor who passed down the haplogroup X1C6A1 mitochondrial DNA sequence to Lucy, who passed it to Nancy, who ultimately passed it to Abraham Lincoln. Deeper Lee ancestry, the British horizon. Before the DNA study, the Lee family of Richmond County, Virginia was historically documented as being of typical British colonial stock. The record trail, paper records indicate that Anne Lee's father was William Lee, born circa 1704 in Virginia, and her grandfather was Richard Lee. This family line had been farming in the northern neck of Virginia for generations. Genetic twist, because Anne Lee's direct maternal line carries the X1C6A1 haplogroup, which traces back to ancient North Africa and the Levant. It means that somewhere far back, an unbroken female line of the Lee family, an ancestor migrated from the Mediterranean into the Western Europe. From Europe, a female descendant moved to colonial Virginia carrying a rare mutation that would eventually find its way to the White House. How the Shipley side was smashed. I want to know, how do you know with certainty that The maternal line was British. We cannot say with certainty that the deep maternal line was ethnically British. There is a clear distinction between the paper trail genealogy, which points to colonial British families, and the deep genetic history, which points to a non-British Mediterranean origin. The two pieces of evidence tell a complex layered history. Okay. The paper trail, geographically British, based on traditional documentary evidence, wills, lands, deeds, and marriage certificates. Historians know that that Nancy's maternal ancestry lived in British colonized Virginia for generations. Her maternal grandmother, Anne Lee, belonged to a well-documented family of English settlers in Richmond County, Virginia. Belonged to a well-documented family of English settlers. From a purely historical, cultural, and recent genealogical perspective, the family was entirely integrated into British colonial life. But is there anything conclusively tying yeah, that's right. But is there anything conclusively tying the Lee family to European genealogy? Human migration. Guatemala country DNA reveals an ancient Mediterranean original family. Mutation timeline. No, I'm referring to genealogical records, and I'm genealogical records such as genealogical records such as probate records, and or court records, birth and death records. There are no known passenger lists, birth certificates, or baptismal records from Europe that explicitly name the direct maternal ancestors of Anne Lee. The conclusion that this family was British or European origin relies entirely on contextual, legal, and linguistic evidence found in colonial American records. The PSYOP is real, y'all. I think I might continue this in the part two, man. You know, let's see what it says here, though. Okay. Richmond County Court records Joseph Hanks, Nancy Lincoln's grandfather, lived in North Farham Parish, Richmond County, Virginia, from his birth in 1725 until 1782. Court records from 1779 to 1782 document Joseph acting as the administrator of his deceased mother's estate, establishing his deep roots in the English colony. Nelson County Will, Kentucky. Joseph Hanks died in Kentucky in 1793. His file probate will explicitly listed his wife Anne and his children, including his daughter Lucy, Nancy Lincoln's mother. Okay. Louisiana Catholic Church records, the most definitive record identifying the maternal grandmother's maiden name, comes from 1798 marriage investigation file in St. Martin Parish, Louisiana. One of Joseph and Anne's sons, Charles Hanks, had migrated to French-controlled Louisiana because he was a foreigner. The local French priest interviewed him extensively about his origins. The priest recorded that Charles was an Anglican from Richmond County, Virginia, and explicitly wrote his parents' names as Joseph Hanks and Anne Lies. The priest's phonetic French influence spelling and elite. So this was Charles Hanks, Joseph, and his son. Okay, so this would have been his grandparents. This would have been Lincoln's great grandparents. Joseph and Anne would have given birth to Lucy, which was Lincoln's grandmother. So this son would have been Abraham Lincoln's great uncle. Interesting. I'm gonna put in one last question. What is an Anglican? An Anglican is a member of the Church of England or one of the global churches connected to it. The word Anglican comes from the medieval Latin phrase Ecclesia Anglicana, which literally means the English church. Okay. Well, obviously that doesn't mean that you come from England. You know what I mean? It's just an association. And right here, I'm gonna end it. I think that was a decent presentation and basically eliminating the projected narrative on the Lincoln family that's not proven. And it just remains that the Lincoln family is, their ancestry is just shrouded. But what we do know is that mtdna, specifically the private S&Ps, are an indigenous development here in the Americas. Now we can make the argument, when it coalesced, where the base haplogroup or S&P coalesced, when that coalesced, blah, blah, blah. It does seem like that happened, it coalesced on the other side of the map. But in terms of, it getting here by way or entering the Americas by way of contemporary European colonial groups, highly improbable. Because for one, they don't carry the base in extreme numbers. It's very rare in Europe. And in addition to that, the private S&Ps are only found in America. I mean, you guys connect the dots and put it together. You guys are welcome to come to whatever conclusion that you do. My conclusion is ancient migration. When they got here, they either brought with them the base, and the base, mutated into these private S&Ps. But here's the problem with that, and I'm gonna ask before I say it's a problem. Um, is the base X1 X1C 6A found in America? The distribution of the base haplogroup X16A in America is characterized by two distinct dynamics. It's found via its only major downstream offshoot, Lincolns. A rare controversial Native American footprint. Already went over that. So it's not even found outside of the Lincolns. So once again, how would it have gotten here if it's not found in Europe, at least in significant saturation, and then the downstream S&Ps are completely not found in Europe? I'm just saying. I think that this entire X1 X1C6 family, I'm thinking that I'm leaning towards that it was all indigenous, because like I said, even the Salutrian model doesn't require that they had traveled with the mitochondrial mtdna X at all. You know what I mean? Because Kennewick man was X2A, and X2A is only indigenous to America. So that means that he had to have encountered it once he entered the Americas. And based on the Kennewick man series and that particular genome study on him I shared, that group of people was said within that genomic study to be African-like people, Black folks. So I'm gonna conclude it right there. That's my take on it. I'm gonna say that this X1C6A is indigenous to the Americas, and therefore part of Lincoln's ancestry, what it looks to be, where he's getting, he could be getting some Negro ancestry from the European side as well. You know what I mean? I don't know for sure, but in this particular presentation, I focused on the maternal line, and that maternal line seems to be definitely Negro, based on the mtDNA and based on how Lincoln described himself and how others, his contemporaries, described himself, and based on the most realistic mode of migration for this particular mtDNA based haplogroup, in which I'm really concluding wasn't migration. If it was migration, it would have had to have been here before the Salutrian population entered the Americas, because based on the genome studies, that group encountered groups carrying X2A once they got here. You know what I mean? And I believe they had gotten here over 13,000 years ago. You know what I mean? And X2A, I believe that derived, let me see, I just asked, X2A derived, or CA coalesced, when? Oh, the timing is, that's matching up perfectly, man. You know what I mean? I believe the Salutrian migration theoretically came into the Americas around like 13,000 years ago, man. You know what I mean? So if X2A coalesce 14,000 to 15,200 to 17,000 years ago, then that's right on par. And we know that the, theoretical parents of X2A had to be here prior to that. So yeah, I'm dimming this indigenous, y'all. You know what I mean? Other groups migrated in and came in contact with this indigenous mtDNA. To me, this is what the evidence is screaming. Anybody else can say what they want, but that's my conclusion. You know what I mean? And I'll probably find more, evidence to speak to Abraham Lincoln's indigenous ancestry as time goes on. But right now, I think that's all I really need, man. I think it's conclusive enough. With that being said, peace, blessings. Fathers, enjoy your day. Happy Father's Day. And that's the end.